Breaking up a signal's frequency response is pretty common at this point. Most of us are familiar with the bass range, the low, the mid-range, and so on. However, the dynamic range is rarely conceptualized in this way, which is a shame, since understanding and controlling these ranges is just as important as controlling the frequency response. So, let's change that today as we achieve expert control and understanding of dynamics. Let's start by organizing and conceptualizing the dynamic range. Although the overall dynamic range could arguably be broken up into more ranges, let's start with 4. From lowest to highest in amplitude, we have our noise floor, which is comprised of the noise generated from our recording equipment, such as the microphone and amplifier self-noise. And then there's quantization noise or error, which is the difference between the original analog signal's amplitude and the digital or quantized signal's amplitude. With today's equipment, this noise is typically imperceivable, especially if no processing has been introduced to amplify it yet. Above this, we have what often gets masked, or what I call a signal's low-level detail. This might be the tail end of a reverb's reflections or a tiny buzz in an acoustic guitar string. Basically anything that's difficult to hear and often covered up by higher amplitude signals. Above this, we have the tonal aspects of an instrument, so the ring or sustain of a snare, or maybe the sustain and release of a piano note or chord. These tonal elements are the biggest contributors to the musical aspects of a recording. It's how we perceive important musical building blocks like notes, chords, melodies, harmonies, and so on. Lastly, we have our high amplitude signals, like the onset of a note, the transient, the attack, basically anything recorded right when the instrument or the signal begins. Going back to our snare example, think of this as the initial hit of the snare. Or with our piano example, it's right when the hammer hits the string. In other words, it's the signal's peak, and it's what we typically control when we use a compressor. Now these ranges can be controlled with traditional dynamics processors, but let's use this dynamic rating plugin since it's going to give me a lot more control over each of these ranges, and it's going to be helpful for me in showing these ideas. Let's take a listen to it as I adjust the levels to generally amplify and attenuate these ranges. Next up, let's discuss how various dynamics processors alter dynamics. So as I said earlier, compressors are the most common way to affect dynamics, especially peak-down compressors. By attenuating peaks, these processors increase headroom or the distance between the peak level and the ceiling or the cutoff for the allowed amplitude in the digital system. Now controlling peaks is more or less a stepping stone to increasing low-level details. Since we increase the headroom, we could use post-compression makeup gain to increase quieter details and then help them become easier to perceive. RMS compression is a form of downward compression, but instead of being triggered by the peaks, the compressor is triggered when the average loudness of a signal crosses the threshold. Now this isn't the best for controlling peaks, but it is a good way to control the tonal aspects of a signal. Upward compression is similar to wave shaping. It's the amplification of quieter details while leaving peaks alone. In this regard, upward compression skips peak attenuation and it gets right to amplifying low-level signals. Now using a processor to amplify the noise floor isn't very common. Instead, we use downward expansion or gating to attenuate the noise floor whenever a signal falls below the threshold. Lastly, we have upward expansion, which amplifies the peaks. This is typically used to expand transients, like if we want the snare to cut through a complex mix. Amplification to the peak occurs once it crosses a processor's determined threshold. The dynamic rating plugin that I was using earlier is a combination of all these processors, with the exception of RMS compression. The signal's dynamics are broken up into controllable bands, similar to how a EQ can break up the frequency response. The left side is the input, and the right is the output. So if I want to attenuate the peaks, I'd isolate the range or have the plugin find the range, and then drag down the bars on the right side to reduce the dynamic range of this region. Or say if I want to amplify quieter details, I could drag the range's top marker on the right side up to expand the range, or drag both markers up to amplify the full range, or a combination of the two. So let's work on a drum track. I'm going to attempt to do 4 things. I'll first amplify the noise floor until it's noticeable before using downward expansion or gating. Then I'll amplify low-level signals to achieve more detail from the drum bus. Then I'll compress, then amplify the tonal aspects to increase the sustain and decay of the kit before slightly controlling the peaks. Let's take a listen and notice the role that each range plays and how they come together to create our overall perception of the drums. Real quick, if you want to get your mixes to sound better than your favorite artist's mixes, we have a mixing membership called the Sage Audio Membership, where you get access to Sage Audio University for in-depth mixing and mastering courses, unlimited personalized mixing feedback, private one-on-one mentorship, and 50 free mastered songs per year. Go to sageaudio.com or use the link in the description. Last up, let's talk about how dynamics relate to the frequency response. So the dynamic ranges that we've discussed could easily be seen as separate from the frequency response, but the two concepts are pretty much inseparable. Now remember earlier when I mentioned that tonal aspects play the biggest role in our perception of musical building blocks? Well, the simplest of these building blocks is a note, which is a specific fundamental frequency with overtones or multiples of this fundamental frequency, also called harmonics. So say the sustain in the release of a piano note is 440 Hz, and then a series of harmonics. This would be the note A4. If I took this dynamic rating plugin and I amplified the tonal range, I'd amplify these frequencies. Similarly, if I reduce the range, I'd attenuate these frequencies. Following this idea, say we have a snare tuned to A3, or its fundamental note is 220 Hz. The peak or attack of the snare will definitely have some of A3, but it's also going to have frequencies that don't relate to the fundamental. The point being, the attack and peak of an instrument can have a different frequency response than the sustain and release or the tonal range. By altering one and not the other, or altering both but in different ways, we can both control dynamics and equalize the signal. So let's take a listen to both a snare and a piano note being affected with this dynamic rating plugin. Notice how the frequency response changes as the dynamic ranges are altered. As I mentioned earlier, if you want to get your mixes to sound better than your favorite artist's mixes, we have a mixing membership called the Sage Audio Membership, where you get access to Sage Audio University for in-depth mixing and mastering courses, unlimited personalized mixing feedback, private one-on-one mentorship, and 50 free mastered songs per year. Go to sageaudio.com or use the link in the description.